So what is going on, everybody? Fernando Silva here with another video, and Apple just had their spring event earlier today and they announced a bunch of new products for us to finally pre-order or order today and then finally get probably towards the end of next week. And those products included a new iPhone SE, a new iPad Air 5 or M1 iPad Air, whatever you want to call it, which we did already talk about in the previous video, but then they also released the Mac Studio and then the Studio Display. And what we're going to talk about in this video is that Studio Display, because I have something kind of interesting which we found kind of in the tech specs about that Studio Display that it might allow us to really use it in a real way with iPads moving forward. Without further ado, let's talk about the Studio Display, the specs, the pricing, the availability, and then finally how it's going to work with iPads moving forward. Let's get into it. So let's talk about this Studio Display. First off, it looks freaking amazing and it looks like it's pretty much just a Pro Display XDR, at least at a glance, for a way smaller percent of the price. I think it's only 30% of what the XDR goes for starting, right? Because I think it starts at $1,500 versus $5,000 with the Pro Display XDR. But again, this is the Studio Display. It is a 27-inch monitor. It's made out of all aluminum. It's got uniform bezels all the way around, so it does look almost kind of like bezel-less, but it does have some bezels on there, and it's a pretty slim form factor overall, it seems like. So very similar to the iMacs. I think it is thicker than the iMacs themselves, but a little bit thinner than that Pro Display XDR, which I've never owned because it is $5,000 for a freaking monitor. But in terms of the technology in this new Studio Display monitor, I mean, it looks and sounds great, right? It's got everything that you would want in a really nice high-end monitor, and it better be nice for $1,500, right? You get 14.7 million pixels, which gives it a PPI of 218, which makes it a 5K display. So you're looking at a 5K monitor, 17 million pixels, 218 pixels per inch. So it's gonna be very, very crisp when you do use this monitor. And then the list of specs keep going. So you got 600 nits of brightness, so it should be plenty bright, especially because you're gonna be indoors with this monitor for the most part, unless you do some Nikias Molina stuff and you take it outside to really start to play with it. But again, 600 nits is gonna be plenty for indoor use. Then you have the whole P3 color gamut, which is included. It has over 1 billion colors. And it's got that True Tone, which has been around on the Retina displays for a while now, which I actually really like and I use in all of my devices that are True Tone capable. So now let's talk about what makes this thing $1,500. So first off, what they really sold everybody on was the new selfie camera. So this is the first Apple product, or I think Apple monitor, that has a built-in selfie camera, in my opinion. I know they had an older kind of secondary display, pre-Pro Display XDR, like almost 10 years ago, and I'm not sure if that had a camera on it, but if this isn't the first, then it's definitely gonna be the best one, where it has a built-in selfie camera or built-in video chat camera in a secondary monitor. And you're also gonna know that it's the same 12 megapixel camera that's in all the iPad Pros, the iPad Mini, and now the new M1 iPad Air. So it's gonna be 12 megapixels, it's gonna be ultra wide, and it's gonna have that center stage, which is gonna be compatible with not only FaceTime, which is Apple's native application, but the things like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and all those other third-party video chat applications, which we've grown to use pretty much on a daily basis. And then again, I think Apple really took note of the work from home situation that a lot of people are still in to this day. So they added some studio array mics. I think there's 3 microphones in there. And then they also added a 6 speaker array for some probably awesome speaker outage. I mean, if the 12.9-inch M1 iPad Pro has only 4 speakers and it's a way smaller form factor and that thing fills up a room no problem, then 6 speakers on a much bigger form factor, which should give us more bass, should sound amazing. So I'm very excited to try that out and to see how loud these speakers can get. And maybe you won't even need some external speaker system because these are gonna be good enough. And then in terms of I/O, I think it's very simple. You get the 1 power cable, which plugs directly into the wall, and then you have 1 Thunderbolt port and 3 USB-C ports. So that is all you have, but those USB-C ports still do AV, so still audio, still pushes video, so you're all good to go if you do want a daisy chain. Because it does support up to 3 monitors. You can have up to 3 studio displays plugged in to your MacBook Pro with no problem with just 1 single Thunderbolt cable, and you just daisy chain the other monitors. So that's a beautiful thing to see. And then lastly, for all those energy people out there that want to know how fast this is going to charge your device when you do have it plugged in, it will push up to 96 watts of power. So you'll be able to use an iPad, a MacBook Air, a MacBook Pro, an M1 Max, an M1 Pro. Whatever Apple computer you currently use, that Apple sells currently, will be able to be fully powered, aside from, I think it's like the 140 watt 16-inch M1 Max that does have that MagSafe 140 watt push through. But with 96 watts, that's going to be plenty to still fast charge that 16-inch MacBook Pro. So keep that in mind. That is every spec that you need to know about that Studio Display, which should be a really nice display, especially made by Apple, $1,500. It better be a wow monitor. But now what I want to talk about is how this Studio Display is going to be working with iPads moving forward. Because I saw on Twitter, I'm going to post a screenshot right here, that somebody mentioned that if you go into the tech specs of the Studio Display, or if any Apple product for that matters. So normally if you go to the tech specs, it's going to let you know what other Apple devices this is going to be compatible with. So if you go to the Studio Display, if you scroll all the way down to the tech specs, you see that it's going to be compatible with the 12.9-inch M1 iPad Pro, the 11-inch iPad Pro, and the iPad Air 5. So having a section just for the iPads, and again, what it does say is that you need to be on iPadOS 15.4 and higher, which means that 15.4 is where Universal Control came in. So keep that in mind. But it's just interesting that Apple would have a little slot on their website to let you know, like, hey, this is going to be compatible with iPads as long as it's on 15.4 and higher. Where if you go into the Pro Display XDR section, go to the tech specs and try to find that same little section for iPads, that's not there. But with the Pro Display XDR, you can still plug in your M1 iPad Pro because it is Thunderbolt capable, and it will work. I mean, it's not going to be a pretty situation, but it will mirror the display of the iPad. So keep that in mind. You have the Pro Display XDR, which says that it's not compatible or doesn't show that it has any compatibility with the iPad Pro, but it still works with the iPad Pro in that normal, terrible fashion of just mirroring the display and getting the black bars and things like that. But then you have the Studio Display, which has a little section dedicated to let you know, like, hey, this is going to work with iPad Pros of this generation with 15.4 and higher. And I'm going to leave it at that, right? I'm going to leave it right there. I think that that means that Apple might be massaging something, they might be figuring something out as to how to use this Studio Display as maybe their jumping off point to really changing how you use your iPad Pro or any iPad for that matter moving forward. Because again, you have 3 USB-C ports, you have 1 Thunderbolt port on the back of the I/O, so you can plug in whether it's an iPad Air or iPad Mini, or you can also probably plug in that iPad Pro with Thunderbolt. But who knows, maybe Apple will give us some situation where with the iPad Pros that have Thunderbolt, you can actually use a Thunderbolt cable to get this new secondary display support on the Studio Display, or maybe it'll work across the entire iPad lineup as long as it has USB-C. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting that Apple, not only they put that little section in the Studio Display, but they omitted that section from the Pro Display XDR, even though it still technically and physically works as a mirror display with that Pro Display XDR. But I'm gonna leave it at that. I just think Apple is stirring something up when it comes to iPadOS working with the Studio Display, and I'm hoping that this means some sort of real extended monitor support moving forward for Apple and for the iPad, or for any iPad for that matter. But I could kind of see maybe this being the jumping off point where Apple finally takes the iPad Pros and kind of solidifies that as the head honcho by giving it some different features that maybe the iPad Mini and the iPad Air and the iPad 9th Gen just don't have. Because right now, your experience on the iPad 9th Gen is going to be the same experience as a fully loaded M1 12.9-inch iPad Pro, just because iPadOS is uniform across the entire lineup. Let's see if Apple gives some better features to the person spending $1,100 on an iPad versus somebody spending $300 on an iPad. But that's going to do it for this video. If you guys made it to the end, leave a little dolphin right here. Leave some comments down below what you guys think about this little section of compatibility with iPads with this display versus not being there on the Pro Display XDR, even though it still works. Very curious to know your thoughts on that. And we'll have a discussion in the comments below. I'm just excited to see what Apple does moving forward and what the future of the iPad has in store, because I think something's brewing, guys. We've been seeing the same thing over and over and over again, and now it's time for the new iPad Pros to come out probably in the fall of this year, and those should be a game changer. But that's going to do it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And until next time, everybody, peace. I'm out of here. Let me know, are you guys picking up anything from this Apple event? You know I'm going with the iPad Air.